Welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World. And as we were doing for the last little bit, I'm going to continue answering a question, or attempting to answer a question from a jar of many questions. Questions that some would deem as spiritual, some would deem as in the realm of personal development, some would deem as just plain good old questions. I am going to pull one out and answer it within, or attempt to answer within a 10-minute time frame. So I pulled out a question, and I'm going to start my timer and do my best to get this question answered. This is a good one. Now that I am retired, why do I feel so restless? Now that I am retired, why do I feel so restless? I'm going to take a deep breath, and then I'm going to breathe out. Trying to ground myself so that I am answering this question not from my ego mind that always wants to be right, but from the higher self, the deeper self, to that wisdom that we all have inherited in us. Not that I'm always getting to that point, but that's where I try to go anyway. So now that I am retired, why do I feel so restless? From what I understand, this is a very common phenomenon with retirement, this idea of restlessness, this inability to settle, always finding it hard to sit. And I myself have experienced that. I was kind of strongly encouraged to retire early because of a health condition that I won't get into. But anyway, so I retired early when I was 56, I believe, and it was maybe a little before 56. And I had to make a big adjustment there because I'm normally a very active person, and then all of a sudden I was retired, and I loved my job, and giving it up was difficult, but I found myself retired. And in that retirement experience, I was beginning to wonder, wow, what am I going to do? I feel bored one moment and very, very restless the next. And from what I read after experiencing that, this is a very common phenomenon among a lot of people that are retired. And I personally believe the reason for that is because we have not mastered a very, very wholesome and skillful life tool. And that is the ability to sit in a room quietly alone. And of course that was Ponce 139 from Blaise Pascal, right? He said that the source of all humanity's suffering is the fact that man cannot sit in a room alone quietly. And that's basically what happens when we're retired. We live in such a productivity-orientated society. We're always going, doing. And the reason why we do that is it's like a diversional activity. Work becomes a diversional activity that keeps us from actually experiencing the self that we are, keeps us up on the surface layer of activity that we are so attached to, this world where we cling for things and run after things or push the unpleasant away, or we create this idea of who we are, this image of ourselves as doers, active beings in society, productive, and bringing, goal direction into our lives, attached to our to-do lists and our mission statements. We do. And we're such doers that even when we're not working, we find it challenging to come home after an 8 or 9 or 12-hour day to sit down and just sit and rest and do nothing. We're automatically going to our cell phones or electronic devices, turning on the televisions, flicking through the channels mindlessly, even not half the time not even aware of what we're doing, because we're so addicted to the doing frenzy that this world promotes, this productivity that the world promotes. So when our jobs probably become probably one of the most important things in our lives. Our careers, our jobs, what we do from that 9 to 5 or whatever shifts you're working, is how we often define ourselves too, right? I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm a plumber, I'm a carpenter. Because that's what we do as a chosen career, a service that we're meant to provide for humanity, but not necessarily something we're supposed to define ourselves by, because we are not those things. Those are just things we do, right? But because they amplify this idea of doing and productivity, we identify with them. So here you are after so many years working in this particular role or job. Some of us have the exact same job for that many years, or maybe different jobs, same type of career or whatnot, or similar careers. And you've been doing that for so long, keeping busy in this busy world, keeping up with all the other busy people in this busy world by doing something and being busy. Then all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. You don't get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get ready to go to work anymore. You don't have to. You know, you don't have that to fill in your day. So though many people will say at the very beginning, oh, I can't wait till I retire, I can't wait to get my rest, I'm going to do this when I retire. When retirement actually hits, it's like a culture shock and a psychic shock, a psychosocial shock, because all of a sudden you're not doing in the way you were doing before. And that causes restlessness. That causes this unease, this inability to settle, you know. Like Pascal said, our inability to settle in a room alone, quietly, is a source of all man's problems. And if you think about it, our inability to not work, our inability to be retired without that degree of restlessness is an indication of how much we as a race are suffering. Our doing tendency, though promoted and cherished and applauded, is actually not wholesome or a skillful way to experience life. There's nothing wrong with working, nothing wrong with being productive, and definitely nothing wrong with serving humanity if that's the type of roles we're playing. But when our role, the work we do and the doing itself, becomes who we think we are, then what happens when we stop doing? Do we cease to be? If you are what you do, Wayne Dyer said, what happens when you stop doing? Do you cease to be? And that's a really good question to ask ourselves. When you do become retired, do you cease to be? No. You think you do because you're no longer what you thought you were when you were doing. But that was never you. That was just something you did. Now this retirement, these years that are stretching ahead of you, for you to be in, for you to find the person you were so busy, too busy to find before, the self that is underneath the superficial layer of productivity and doing and clinging and gaining and success and all those terms, you know, society loves to promote, to the deeper self, the quiet self, the still self. Because that's who you are. You will find yourself there. Retirement offers us a wonderful time to do that. And these years that we tend to retire in are what's often known in some cultures as the wisdom years. You know, we're becoming the elders of our village now. The ones that the younger generations will possibly look up to for the answers and for solutions and for guidance and direction. And if we're just restless because we don't know how to do, and we're just picking up other things to do and flitting around here and flitting around there, then we won't be there to help them. So this is the time. This is a time, and we're given the blessing of this time to learn to sit still and be with what is and find that island of refuge that's within us, where the wisdom is, where the stillness is, where there is no restlessness, just peace, and to operate from there. Retirement can give us that. We can get beyond this restlessness, use it as the banging gong telling you, hey, Something's off here. If you're feeling restless because you're no longer working in the job that you defined yourself as, maybe you need to do some self-evaluation. Maybe you need to do some sitting still and some sitting with this restlessness so you can get beyond it. Maybe you need to learn to fall into the self, who you really are, instead of all these definitions you had for yourself and this image you had of yourself, and be who you really are. And it is the time to do that. We do not have to be restless in our retirement. Don't beat yourself up if you are, because I would say 90% of the population are. So many of us are not at that level of understanding yet because we're so caught up in the busy world. Let's take a step away from the busy world now that we're retired and learn to sit quietly in a room alone, so that when the younger generations look up to us, they'll see the thing they need the most emanating from us, and that's our peace and our wisdom that can never be found in any role we've played out there, any job we had, or any career. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with who we are, who we truly are. Well, that's all I have to say about that. I hope it was enough. Thank you so much for joining. Namaste.